During the 1600s, London had already become one of Europe's most populous cities, with nearly 500,000 residents. It was a tightly packed, rapidly expanding urban center driven by commerce, waterway activity, and endless traffic along the Thames. In this video, I'm using contemporary artificial intelligence technology to animate historical artwork and old prints, giving us the ability to adjust our viewpoint, shift angles, and explore these same locations in ways the original creators couldn't have imagined. I'd like to begin with what's now known as the Old London Bridge, a landmark I knew surprisingly little about until I began investigating it. During the 1600s, Old London Bridge served far more purposes than simply connecting opposite banks. It functioned as a heavily constructed street hovering over the Thames, joining the City of London with Suffolk. Residences, commercial establishments, storage facilities, places of worship, and gatehouses crowded the bridge so thoroughly that from afar it resembled less of a crossing and more of an unbroken community stretching across the water. The structure relied on a sequence of tight stone archways held up by enormous piers. These narrowed the tidal currents of the Thames flowing underneath, generating fierce water movements that made passage treacherous. Boats trying to navigate through these archways encountered violent rushes of water, and mishaps occurred frequently. The structures on the bridge climbed multiple floors upward, frequently jutting outward above the roadway, and inhabitants resided above the perpetual flow of wagons, horses, and foot traffic beneath them. Flame was an ever-present threat. Crowding was inescapable, yet people persisted in living and conducting business here across multiple generations. Traveling across Old London Bridge meant moving not just through a commercial corridor, but underneath conspicuous symbols of power and governance. Below, the Thames operated as London's main thoroughfare. Cargo vessels, ferry boats, trading ships, and smaller watercraft filled the river, transporting wheat, lumber, coal, fabric, and foreign merchandise. The waterway linked London to England's heartland, to continental Europe, and to the broader Atlantic realm, positioning the bridge as a location where neighborhood existence and international commerce converged. During particularly harsh winters, the limited passage beneath the bridge's archways could help the river solidify. Throughout these uncommon stretches, the Thames temporarily changed character, with people strolling and assembling on the frozen surface below the bridge, a remarkable departure from the peril the river typically represented. This perspective reveals the northern approach to the bridge, reached through the district adjacent to St. Magnus the Martyr's Church, apparent on the left side. By the middle of the 18th century, the bridge had declined so severely that authorities chose to clear and reconstruct it. And between 1756 and 1762, the structures that had packed Old London Bridge for generations were systematically torn down. Though the artwork originates from the 1700s, it portrays a crossing that had already influenced London for ages. Astonishingly, this is a location you can still experience today. What makes Old London Bridge extraordinary isn't merely its construction, but its persistence as inhabited territory. It operated at once as framework, trading hub, residential quarter, and emblem. Monarchs and ordinary citizens traversed it, merchants and workers toiled upon it, and outsiders reaching London first met the city at this confined passage. Old London Bridge was jam-packed, shadowy, and frequently unhygienic. It impeded movement, created commerce blockages, and presented ongoing dangers to those who inhabited and labored upon it. Still, for generations, it stayed essential. Up until the 18th century, it remained the sole fixed Thames crossing in central London, making it unavoidable for travel northward or southward through the city. Occasionally, I imagine being able to travel backward and witness this location as it existed, even for just a single day. For the present, I suppose this artificial intelligence recreation is the nearest I can approach that aspiration. This is Buckingham House during the late 1600s and early 1700s. Well before its transformation into Buckingham Palace, it was initially constructed as a private residence on London's western perimeter positioned away from the city's congested center, encircled by vacant terrain and green spaces. During this period, this district represented the dividing line between metropolitan London and the rural landscape beyond, a testament to how even as the city expanded more densely, its boundaries remained distinctly recognizable. In September 1666, London suffered one of the most catastrophic blazes in its existence. What started as a minor ignition rapidly expanded through a city constructed predominantly of wood, its confined lanes and packed structures transforming the blaze into an overwhelming catastrophe. The initial picture displays Ludgate engulfed, with the old St. Paul's Cathedral apparent in the background, its rectangular tower already under threat. Shortly, even this enormous monument would be devoured. The subsequent perspective gazes across the Thames near Tower Wharf on the evening of September 4th. London looks like an uninterrupted barrier of flames. On the left appears London Bridge, while on the right, the Tower of London barely avoids annihilation. Old St. Paul's ignites at the middle of the horizon. Within merely days, much of medieval London was turned to cinders. However, the inferno represented a watershed moment, eliminating generations of compressed development and compelling the city to reconstruct, reorganize, and start fresh. Climbing above the waterway, the Tower of London during the 1600s occupied a position at the heart of royal authority. By this era, it served as a military stronghold, a weapons depot, a financial repository, and among the most infamous detention facilities in England. Prominent captives charged with betraying the crown were confined inside its boundaries. The tower also contained royal documentation, armaments, and even the sovereign's jewels, strengthening its function not simply as a location of incarceration, but as a foundation of the English government. This scene depicts Cheapside in 1638, among London's most significant processional routes during the entry of Marie de Medici as she arrived in the city to see her daughter, Queen Henrietta Maria, and King Charles I. Cheapside wasn't simply a business thoroughfare, but a platform for royal exhibition, bordered with water channels, monuments, and provisional frameworks for civic occasions. At the middle rises the Cheapside Cross, a recognized feature and meeting spot. While troops, administrators, and masses occupy the street below, the spectacle moments like this mirrored mounting political and religious strain as Henrietta Maria's Catholic beliefs and foreign background troubled a city already moving towards civil conflict. Presently, this identical section continues as modern Cheapside in the city of London near St. Mary-le-Bow, a location where the road persists even as the medieval features have disappeared. This picture reveals the governmental and spiritual compound of Westminster in 1647, observed from beyond the River Thames at a time when England itself faced deep separation. On the left appears the old Palace of Westminster, the location of Parliament and the nucleus of political influence. By the mid-17th century, it had evolved into the central point of increasing friction between the Crown and Parliament, particularly throughout the years of the English Civil War. Adjacent to it towers Westminster Hall, among the most ancient and impressive remaining sections of the palace, utilized for legal proceedings, government trials, and significant public assemblies. Its enormous ceiling representing royal power long before it became a venue for questioning it. On the right looms Westminster Abbey, the nation's spiritual core. For ages, it had functioned as the location of coronations, royal memorial services, and the resting place of kings and queens, reinforcing the sacred aspect of monarchy. In 1647, the abbey existed uneasily between custom and turmoil as religious separations reshaped England's establishments. At the middle of the scene lie Westminster Stairs, a heavily used river dock where visitors arrived and left by watercraft. In an era before bridges and surfaced roads controlled movement, the Thames operated as London's principal channel, transporting politicians, religious leaders, messengers, and residents directly to the entrance of authority. This engraving depicts the Palace of Whitehall in 1643, at that time the most expansive royal dwelling in England, and the principal home of the sovereign. From these water-facing platforms, kings and court members reached by vessel, emphasizing the Thames as London's primary passage of movement and influence at the core of the Stuart court. Extending along the Thames, Whitehall wasn't a singular palace, but an enormous arrangement of chambers, rooms, and governmental structures where royal administration was performed. The majority of Whitehall was demolished by fire at the conclusion of the 17th century, and presently only the banqueting house remains, existing as the final piece of what was previously the hub of royal existence. This is Richmond Palace during the 16th and early 17th centuries, among the most significant royal properties outside central London. Initially reconstructed by Henry VII on the location of an earlier medieval estate, Richmond became a preferred escape for Tudor and early Stuart rulers, providing fresher atmosphere and room distant from the packed city. It was at this location that Elizabeth I experienced her closing days, passing away at the palace in 1603, signifying the conclusion of the Tudor lineage. Over the years, the palace became disused and was progressively taken apart, and presently its territory comprises part of modern Richmond, with only fragments of its walls and configuration remaining underneath the streets and waterside walkways. Standing here, reflecting on these moments, it's difficult not to sense how near the past truly is. These roads, these structures, these occurrences form the reality we inhabit. What strikes me most about these places isn't just their grandeur or historical importance, but the ordinary lives that filled them. The merchants arguing over prices on Old London Bridge, the families watching flames consume their homes in 1666, the prisoners staring through tower windows, wondering if they'd ever walk free again. These weren't just monuments or landmarks, they were living, breathing spaces where real people experienced joy, fear, ambition, and loss, just as we do now. Through these recreations, we receive just a window into what it was like to exist there. Every time I work on bringing these scenes back to life, I'm reminded that history isn't some distant, disconnected thing locked away in textbooks. It's woven into the very ground beneath our feet. The streets we walk, the buildings we pass without thinking, the past shaped everything around us, and in many ways it's still speaking if we're willing to listen. If you enjoyed this journey through 17th century London, please consider subscribing to see more historical recreations like this. If there's a different city, a different period in history, or a historic location you'd like to witness restored to life, share it in the comments. I'd be excited to continue developing this exploration into the past together with you. Thank you so much.